I want to talk today about the real dangers that I've seen with a spiritual path that lacks psychological grounding. And I wanted to give you some concrete examples of what I've seen out there that it really is actually almost harming people. And so when I think about the importance of a psychological and spiritual approach to healing, and both, this video today is for people who are on the healing path, right? And have a growth mentality and are doing the inner work, right? As well as for practitioners that are offering the support services to people. And ideally, the people who are in these support positions, like myself and coaches, helpers, healers, therapists, spiritual teachers, can also be sharing with their people that we're continuing to do our inner work as well. So, the danger that I've seen to people who lean more in a spiritual direction is that they can get themselves into a lot of trouble. I want to just say right off the bat that if there's a spiritual teacher or community out there, and there are many, many of them nowadays, who do not have the understanding within themselves that a psychological spiritual approach is best, then they can actually be teaching their, people, their community, that therapy is not necessary, that psychology in a more grounded way is actually to be rejected. I've heard this time and time again from some spiritual teachers that will explicitly say those things to their community. Um, the other way that it comes out is that they never touch it, they never mention it, and they never say things to their community or their people like, "Hey, this actually is not a replacement for therapy or mental health support." The best spiritual teachers out there, if they do choose to stay in their lane of being a spiritual teacher, recognize this about themselves and will tell people explicitly, whether that's in writing on their website or directly speaking out loud, this is not a replacement for therapy or working with a mental health professional. Some people are just doing that to sort of save themselves from trouble, if anything were to happen. But then the best of the teachers, especially my current two teachers, really do understand and believe that, and are actively working to assess the people that they're working with to suggest and refer the people that need it to a more grounded psychological approach, sometimes even traditional therapy. Those are the best of the best in terms of the people out there that really understand how to truly help humanity. But what I've seen is when people, spiritual teachers, do not have this understanding, likely because they themselves, on their own personal healing path, have not actually ever gone through traditional therapy or more grounded psychological work themselves, right? They're usually not going to recommend or understand in an embodied way the importance of this type of healing work. And they might actually officially reject that, right? Or speak in the way that they teach to their people, that that's not necessary, or, talking a lot of smack about it. So I'm not here to say that every single therapist out there is helpful. I have heard many times over my 15 years of practicing with people that people have bad experiences with therapy or with therapists. But you're going to find this in every single domain, right? If you reject therapy because you've had a bad experience with somebody and you don't understand that, just like the realm of coaching or healers or spiritual teachers, there's going to be great people and there's going to be people who aren't so good. And it's our responsibility to not reject the whole thing if we have a bad experience, but keep an open mind if possible to be able to try different people. In my own life of actually receiving therapy, I have also had the experience of working with people who weren't so great. And then it took time for me to find someone who was absolutely amazing, and it changed my whole life. Right. And so we can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater with these things. It's the same exact thing for really any practitioner, right? Maybe it's like a medical doctor or someone who works on the more physical level, right? Maybe it's coaches. I mean, people are people, humans are humans. Some of them are better at what they do than others, and we have to be able to keep an open mind rather than just reject something completely based on maybe one bad experience. That being said, I always have compassion for people who maybe haven't had success, with therapy. And so that is why in my own personal healing, journey over the years, I knew this and learned it as well. And it wasn't until I discovered breath work and started to really weave in the spiritual side in addition to the psychological healing that was the missing puzzle piece for me. And so that's why now when I serve people, I bring what I know works, for people. But let's get back to spiritual teachers or practitioners who are directly telling their people that they don't need therapy or talking a lot of smack about therapy. It's gotten really dangerous. I've seen a lot of spiritual teachers who are taking on clients who are very mentally unwell, who are not stable, who are incredibly dysregulated, who have a ton of unhealed trauma, and sometimes to the point where that person is suicidal or maybe a harm to other people. And it's really, there's really sad, really, really sad stories as well of like people who have actually not gotten the psychological help that they need, who have taken their lives. And this is very, very serious. This is a very serious thing that people who are practitioners need to be able to get real with themselves in terms of the scope that they're able to provide in terms of support for their people. And it takes real humility to understand that you are not, nobody is really the one person that can solve everybody's problems. Even for me, having a truly psycho-spiritual approach can help people so that they don't have to hire, four different practitioners on their team, all doing these separate things to sort of form this more holistic team. So people come to me and they love the fact that I do have like I'm have the therapy background in addition to weaving in coaching, in addition to understanding the spiritual side, in addition to energy work, and I pull in as much as I can that I'm confident that I can provide people, right, without trying to be everything to everyone. And that can save people time. But I still sometimes need to refer people out, to different specialties. Maybe it's like deep, deep nervous system healing or a more somatic approach. Although, in my own way, I try to be as holistic as possible. And I think people really appreciate that about me. But I've really seen huge blind spots, especially people who are more spiritual teachers who are just denying, right, that there's any need for a grounded psychological approach. This is where the ego that is becomes very spiritualized starts to play tricks on you to tell you that you're above that somehow, that you don't need to come down to the ground level. But, I've seen this so often and I've had my own lessons in my own life around wanting to skip past the foundation as well. And it just doesn't work. And so what happens with life is that life knows all of this, right? This is where the universal aspect of what I'm saying, of this just being true in a more holistic way to make sure that we're tending to physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual levels of health. Life knows this already. And so when we skip steps or when we try to avoid any one of these domains, we are typically sometimes we're dragged, down to face the things that we need to face that we have been avoiding because the ego doesn't actually know what's best for it and a lot of times resists healing and tells us stories that we're somehow above these things and don't need them anymore. And so it's hard for me sometimes to watch the more spiritual communities that think that they don't need this stuff. And I have to have a trust in the bigger thing that they will eventually be led to understanding where their blind spots are so that they can go there, so that they can actually see what it's like to discover the missing puzzle pieces and how this really can help move things in a very dramatic way. When I pulled breathwork into my personal healing practice, it was like that. And it was just like everything just started to work together and catapulted me into the next level. To this day, I don't neglect the grounded psychological work, but because I have already spent years and years there, and have like a way that I work with myself on my own inner work on a day-to-day basis, that's checking in psychologically. I don't need to, I feel like I don't need to like be in intensive therapy right now. But if I ever got to a point where I did see that, then I would be, right? And so I have a devotion to myself to always, I always want to know my blind spots and where I can show up. And so, this video that I posted about are you too spiritually advanced, and lacking psychological grounding, that was actually one of the videos when I first started to post a few months ago on YouTube regularly that got a lot of traction. And there was also some opinions where it did trigger a lot of people who didn't want to hear it, and that's okay. Because it's not going to be for everybody, and the people who actually think that they don't need it and can skip over it, with all due respect, they'll be pulled there to see it at some point. But we can save ourselves a lot of pain and suffering if we actually just get humble and truly ask ourselves if we have done that kind of work. I don't actually know anybody, I'm just going to be really honest with you, who couldn't use some grounded psychological healing. I just don't know anybody these days who couldn't benefit from that. And of course, the whole other side of the spectrum is also true, which is that some people only stay there and they actually need to incorporate spirituality. They need to incorporate a relationship with the spiritual realms for sure. I mean, I think that many of us know that. But most people who come to me who are in my community are what I would say a little bit more spiritually advanced. And so I'm always feeling into a person or the groups that come to me to see where I can best serve. I'm really looking at the balance, right, of what is going on in terms of spiritual understanding versus a grounded psychological approach, versus like what is needed maybe on a level of somatic or physical body healing and all of it, right? This is what a good practitioner does is they actually assess the whole situation, the whole person to see, what are their strengths and maybe where do they need to develop more, right? What is the missing puzzle piece? Because this is like the greatest gift that we can give to people is to be able to do that assessment and to be able to offer them, to be able to hold that mirror up to say, hey, okay, you're really, really advanced in this area, and this would assist you, right? And so this is like my whole spiritual path has to do with moving more towards wholeness and integration on all the levels. And so just naturally, I'm kind of wired to not only always be checking in with myself, but also with the people that I serve here. So I think let me just open my notes because I wrote quite a bit this morning and I just wanted to make sure I covered everything. So I really just wanted to come on and state once again the importance of grounded psychological work for those who maybe lean more in a spiritual direction. The psychological and the spiritual integration are key. And actually, the original meaning of the word psyche is soul. And so psychology, actually, if we return back to the original like frequency of that, it actually, the psycho-spiritual was already embedded in it, right? But then what happened with psychology is that it actually started to become sanitized and the spiritual aspects started to get stripped from it to the point where it right now, the way most people are practicing, if they're in the more traditional psychology lane, does lack spirituality. Things are changing though nowadays, which is really, really good. So at this point, like I would never really want to go back to more of like a psychological approach that is stripped of spirituality. But depending on a case by case basis with my clients, sometimes I'll work one-on-one with a client where we don't even touch spirituality because they already have that times 100 developed, and now I need to bring them back down to a grounded approach, and it doesn't always feel sexy, especially for people who love, pushing the edges spiritually and going deeper and deeper and deeper or higher and higher and higher spiritually. There will be resistance, and like going to the grounded psychological stuff might feel like it's not sexy, it's not fun. There can be a lot of ego resistance. Even for me as a teacher, I often say, like, I don't like love teaching about the more foundational stuff, right? Of attachment style, of codependency, of communication. But with all due respect to myself, I have to be able to like put my own preferences to the side of what really lights me up to be able to really serve my community in a way that I'm giving them the things that time and time again I see that they need, right? And these are the things, if the foundational stuff is not there, like you're not going to be able to go to the heights truly that this path of spiritual relationships or evolutionary relationships can bring you to. The foundation is humbling for all of us, and there is a resistance to going back there, but it's worth every penny. So, and then I also have the spiritual ego these days collectively is quite strong, where many people who lean that way actually overtly reject therapy. And this is kind of what I'm trying to say here is that we really need to be careful. And I talk about this is a huge trap. Even see some spiritual teachers teaching their students to reject therapy. I've seen firsthand on a case by case basis with people's lives that this is harmful, where people have actually ended up taking their lives, for example. And that's just an extreme way it can manifest, right? When that is not tended to. But there's all many different flavors of how that can show up where it's not just not helping, right? The bypassing thing is very real. And so, if you're a practitioner, I feel like for the best of the best of us, like we would, as practitioners, want to actually make our service, our support more holistic. Now, we're not here to be everything to everybody, and there is a limit for all of us in terms of what we can realistically provide. Like I don't pretend to be, a deep, deep somatic therapist, in addition to a nervous system specialist, in addition to weaving in the energetic or the spiritual, right? That would be too many things, too broad. So there is a benefit to finding sort of the middle way of like, let me actually see if I can be more holistic, but also be clear within myself and be humble enough to know where I actually have gifts and not be able to not stretch myself too wide so that I actually am not really like deeply of use in a certain way to people. But I also in my own healing journey have had to put that team of people together, right? Of like, okay, here's someone who can really help me in the spiritual realms. Here's my physical health person. Here's my psychology, my emotional mental. And so I think that that's where realistically more people are at these days, where they understand all of these different domains and how they all need to be part of the picture. But there's really not, one person who can fit the bill for everything. However, if we can maybe have two people that are assisting us that can cover most of the bases rather than like six people, that would be awesome, right? So I think honestly, for me, whether you do this work professionally or not, all of us are being invited into more integration. And so, even if you're just on the healing path, understanding that psychology and spirituality are both needed will take you very far. Okay, so I'm gonna wrap up soon, but I just wanted to check here. Yeah, I mean, I just say that for some teachers who are more spiritual, it might be helpful for those who are called to get more proper training and grounded psychological support. I know it's not feasible for everybody to go back and get like a degree, for example, but there's so much out there that you can actually learn and get quite a bit of really good training and insight into the the more grounded psychological side of things these days. And so, yes, not everyone's called to like broaden that, but like I said, to just be real with your people that like that is not something that you can provide, and to continue to refer and point people to knowing that this is the mental health, the psychological realm is something that they do need to check in with themselves on and tend to. And like I said earlier, sometimes those people would very much do well to refer specific clients or people who they can see need that support and encourage them to hire a therapist and work with people. And it's really good also if you're a spiritual teacher to have people that you can refer them to, because most people are not, it's so much more successful if you can point someone to a specific person rather than just say, hey, you probably should find a therapist. It's just the success rate of that actually happening is much stronger if you can point them to people. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I just have here the best teachers make it clear in the language, right? They have the understanding that a truly psychospiritual approach is necessary, and they actually are aware, right? And so, like, this for me also gets into our humbleness as practitioners to understand that yeah, it's like the red flag here is with people who think that they are the only person who can help somebody. They're the only one. And that's where the ego is coming in and tricking them. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I just want to wrap up by saying that I know that this is going to trigger some people. If people are already triggered, they probably left watching this video. But I would say spiritual teachers who don't do this are definitely a red flag, right? They actually don't know their own limits and they don't know their own scope of practice truly. And they've often rejected therapy in their own lives, or maybe they had a bad experience or something. So, in their own lives, they rarely have actually reaped the benefits of grounded psychological work within themselves, right? And so, they might truly believe that a one-sided approach of just spirituality works. Um, so this is why for all of us who hire professionals to support us, it really can be beneficial to ask them about the inner work that they've done, right? To ask spiritual teachers if they have actually done some years of more grounded psychological work within themselves. This is a question that you can ask. You can ask all of the people these questions. It might take some people off guard who aren't used to actually being questioned, but I do feel like this is really important. This is why in my own work, I often am very transparent about the inner work that I've already done, right? And I've been on the path of deep shadow work since 2014, right? For real, years and years and years, in addition to my own spiritual practice. And like breath work is one way I do that. And that's 8 years now of me doing that. And, I won't get into it here, but what I'm saying is like I'm always very open and transparent with I'm on the path and the work I've done. And I do think that a practitioner has the responsibility to at least in part share with their people, what have you done internally with your own healing? Because we know that like I can't show up and serve if I don't have the lived embodied experience of going through my own healing and alchemizing my own life. And also the humility to be like, hey, I'm also still on the path, right? I'm never going to be done. I'm committed to this work till my last day. So these are all green flags to people, right? And the people that I work with, I also look for this as well. And so transparency there is really key, and it does matter. It really does matter. I think that we're coming to a point where we can feel and appreciate a teacher who has that embodied lived experience. And this is a form of discernment of who we choose to work with. And it's never been more important in this day and age because we know that the whole landscape is flooded right now with people who are calling themselves coaches or healers or teachers. And so because it's so flooded right now, I think that we as people who are seeking support are necessarily increasing our level of discernment with who we choose to hire. Okay, so yeah, I mean, I just say here, spiritual teachers who are taking on clients who are very mentally unwell and psychologically ungrounded are perpetuating this problem, and I've seen it firsthand. And some of them even directly teach their clients to reject therapy, or that somehow they are better than or more advanced than that. So it's just really harmful, and I've seen very sad cases of this. So just to wrap up here, I'm really happy that people are talking about a more psycho-spiritual approach and the necessity of that. This is why I really resonate very deeply with Laura Matsu and Bernhard Gunther's teachings, because they are always talking about this, always. And any colleague of mine that really truly has this approach is someone that I know I can trust and even refer people to as well. So yeah, I just wanted to wrap up by saying I wouldn't share this if I truly didn't believe that it was of service to people. It does for all of us. It takes humility to be able to actually look at ourselves and actually assess, right, where there are imbalances within ourselves. But, even though it takes humility, like that is the path to liberation, because then you're like, oh, wow, okay, here's an area that really could use attention. So I think I'm going to wrap up there, but I hope this was helpful. And I would love to hear your thoughts on the importance of a psycho-spiritual approach and also what you've seen out there in terms of these imbalances and maybe some of the dangerous um, real like consequences that are happening in terms of um, either taking a healing approach yourself that's imbalanced or practitioners who are also teaching in an imbalanced way. So, okay, talk to y'all soon.